about mindful crafting, which is one of the sessions in WellVet Virtual 2020 on the 23rd of May. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what got me into crafting and why I'm talking to you today. Then we'll talk a little bit about mindful crafting and what it is and why it's important. And then I'm going to help guide you through some ideas of a project that we can make together over the next week, and then on the day we can share what we've all made and see what ideas people have come up with. So what got me into crafting? So I think I've always been a crafter. I can remember making things at primary school, and I and my mother still have some of them. And then the first proper thing that I made was this quilt. So I made this the summer before I went to university. I raided my mother's sewing box, and so all these fabrics all have a different meaning to me. But it also has a functional purpose as well, is that it keeps me warm, and it's still on our bed today. So that's where my crafting began. I now use crafting as a way of relaxing, and in fact it's more than that, and I'll talk about that in a bit. To me, crafting is a way of being mindful. So I have tried mindful meditation. I did a whole month course of the daily breathing exercises and emptying your mind and being still and in the present, but I didn't find that really worked for me. I found it very hard, because as soon as I tried to empty my mind of negative thoughts, they would all just jostle and come back in. But I found over time that actually when I was doing crafting, I was making something, my hands were busy, my mind had time to be freed, and those negative thoughts dissipated. Now, it wasn't that they were completely absent, but like mindfulness, I could take them and look at them, and like a piece of craft, I could turn them around and figure out what to do with them. So for a time I did put down crafting, and that was to my detriment. And the past few years I've really got into it again and explored some new crafts, and I really find that doing some crafting on a very frequent basis really does help me to stay calm, relaxed and focused. And you'll probably find me at lunchtimes at work with a little craft box. So this is something I just put in my bag that goes to work, and it means that I can do crafting anywhere. Crafting is also a way of making unique things, so whether they're gifts or things for myself, they can be part of my expression of who I am and my own personality. Also, through crafting I get to appreciate what others have made as well. So for example, this is a paper cut. I didn't make this, I bought this, but looking at the time, the craftsmanship and the artmanship of what's gone into that, I went, yeah, I'll buy that. Sadly, the gentleman that made these didn't feel that he was enough of an artist to actually sign his work, but you can find him at Church Stretton. I think he's still there. Generally, my crafting is more towards the nature and tactile things. So nature provides all manner of inspiration for me, of things that I can feel, touch, draw, use. And I love the tactile nature of textiles and needlework and felt work as well. So a lot of my work is needleworking of various kinds, and also felting as well. But to me, it is also the process of crafting that's very important as well. The learning of a new technique, learning how a new material acts in your hands and how it's shaped by whatever tools you're using in that. And that's part of the reason why I did a woodworking course for 6 months. So I'd never worked with wood before. To do wood carving or this kind of sculpture is you're removing material, whereas everything else I'd done is you add material or you add stitches. wood carving is taking stuff away and you have to visualise the 3D thing within just a plain block of wood. And also I had a very personal reason for trying wood carving as well. These are my grandfather's tools. So he was left for dead at Dunkirk, and I wanted to use his tools to create something to him so that I can remember him as well. And process goes across many different materials as well. So for several years I've been doing jewellery making. So I've made this. And then I thought I'd try some blacksmithing as well. And actually using some very similar skills between the two showed me how people might work with metal, whether that's steel or silver. So I do many different crafts. My husband says I collect them, and the house is kind of overtaken at the moment with all kinds of stuff around the house. But it gives me great joy to be able to just pick up something and have a little go at it. I would also like to just touch on the definitions of craft and art. Now, for me, I think these definitions are completely arbitrary and artificial. I think there is so much overlap, especially these days. Traditionally, crafting was something to be functional, to be used. It was the process of making it, so that's where you get craftsman. And it was the materials that were to be used as well, so wood, metal, etc. Whereas art was traditionally to do with, purely to do with the outcome, the aesthetics and the beauty. And so you get an artist, whereas you get an artisan making craft. But I think these are really quite arbitrary definitions. For example, take that paper cut again, is that it requires a great deal of craftsmanship to be able to create that as well, but it is also artful as well, the composition and design of it. So I don't think that is any less of a piece of art than a traditional painting. So really what I'm talking about then is making things. So whether that is to the end of having something functional or something beautiful, or ideally having them both in the same thing. To me, making things is really quite important, especially these days when our lives and our houses are full of mass-produced, commercial, generic stuff. This generic stuff doesn't tell us anything about ourselves. Everybody can go out and buy the same. Also, a lot of this stuff is mass-produced and it's not good for the environment. We buy it, we put it in our homes, we go, don't like it, we get rid of it, we can buy something else. So it's really not good for the environment. Whereas if we make things, we are much more likely to be attached to them and they're going to be cherished for much longer. They also make good gifts. I also want to touch on the difference between an art brain and a science brain. And I think this is totally arbitrary as well. We both have parts of us that are more logically flow-based and parts of us that are creative. And the bits that are used every day obviously become the ones that are more dominant. For example, a veterinary world is very much sciencey, and that's using your logical brain. But if we can balance that with a creative part of you as well, then you become much more balanced as well. And a lot of these things are very transferable. Transferable skills, that's a good thing. For example, some of these things, is it not surgery, maybe, in a different form? So that's my introduction to me and my crafting journey. So mindful crafting. Why is crafting mindful? So I think we need to start thinking about what mindfulness actually is. And it boils down to being in the present, focusing your entire mind on just what's happening at this moment in time. I found this description really quite useful for those who haven't come across mindfulness before. Mindfulness is the awareness and acceptance of all that is in the present moment. It means letting go of the past and what might happen in the future, and coming into complete participation with what is going on at this instant. The now is all that exists, and when we are in it, we let go of anxiety and fear. So I found mindful meditation really quite hard. But I do find that crafting gives me a mindful state. I zone into what I'm doing, I focus intensely on what's happening at that moment in time, and the previous worries in my mind go, and future worries seem to disappear as well. It's not that those problems have gone, and it's not that they're blanketed out. It's that they're not there at that moment. But also, as part of crafting, if it's something that's not involving my 100% concentration, I then do have the time and the mind space to pick up the thought of what I was worried about, and to look at it from a different angle, and to think about it in a different way. And that is also very good for mental wellness as well. Mindfulness has a great amount of research that shows how helpful it is for mental wellness. Lots and lots of research papers about it. And there is starting to become some evidence that crafting can cause similar positive effects as well. For example, there's a research study that shows that knitting is as good as yoga. But I don't think that all crafts or making are the same in a mindful way. I definitely think there are some crafts that are much better at producing that mindful state than others. For example, let's take the difference between a craft that might take you hours or weeks or months or years, as opposed to something that's a quick fix, or something that perhaps you don't even need to think about at all, like painting by numbers. So I think the most mindful crafts are the ones that are slow. What we're looking for here is the long, slow burn of serotonin, as opposed to a quick dopamine hit of something finished and posted on social media. Also, crafting and making that's methodical is also very mindful as well. If you're having to go through a process and a flow to get things to a certain stage. Also, rhythmic and repetitive actions in crafts are also very good for a mindful state. So have a think about things like knitting, crocheting, or even needlework, as those are all got repetitive and rhythmic processes with your hands. Now, unfortunately, in this video and the time we have available, I can't teach you how to knit, sew or do needlecraft, so we are going to go for something a bit quicker, but perhaps use this as a test and a taster as to explore other things that could become your slow, mindful crafting. Another way that crafting is very useful is by getting you in something called the flow. If you've ever become so concentrated on doing something that time seems to disappear, that is the flow. And certainly this happens quite a lot for me when I zone into doing something crafty. I can start doing it and I think that was a good half an hour, I enjoyed that, and I look at the clock and most of the day has gone. And that's happened to me quite a lot over the past few days as I've been preparing for this video. Crafting also helps your creative experimentation. So these are bits in your brain that you might not get to use in your day-to-day work, but they also need exercising as well. You need to be able to explore the world. Maybe learn some new things. Learn about different textures, different materials. Also, observing things in great detail as you're drawing them. These are all parts of being mindful and also help to exercise different parts of your brain. and help you be curious about the world as well. There can unfortunately though be some barriers to crafting, and one of those is feeling that you're not good enough to do crafting. And I think this stems from something that's been nicknamed a talent myth. Too often people look at something that somebody has created and say, oh, that's so good, you're so talented, when they're actually doing you a disservice. I like to point out that talent might help you initially. If you start off doing something and you get some good results, then you have some innate ability there, what you might call talent, and then that might help you to move further into that craft. But actually it's practice that continues you down that journey and continues your growth in crafting. I've been stitching for 20 years. I've been doing photography for 20 years. Therefore, my outcomes are only because I've been doing lots of practice. The other barrier to crafting can be our innate perfectionism. And I know we all have it to some degree. I know I certainly do. When I look at a piece of work, I can only see my mistakes, my flaws. But I know that other people don't see those. We need to learn to stop being so judgmental and self-critical about our work. It really can be quite stifling to creativity. And also, mistakes aren't always bad. Mistakes can sometimes lead us to places that we didn't expect. The outcome might even be better. Also, we have to really be realistic that a lot of the stuff we're working with is unpredictable. It might act in a way that we're not familiar with, or even a way that we can't predict. For example, doing wood carving, it could be that the wood splits in a way that I wasn't expecting, or that the chisel slips in a way that I didn't know it would. So we need to stop being so self-critical about our work. And that also comes down to practice as well. If we're too self-critical at the start of a process of learning, we're unlikely to continue. Now, I really haven't done any portraiture at all, and yesterday I was practicing using some different techniques for the crafting project for you guys, and I thought I'd try a portrait. This is it. It's not very good, but I acknowledge it's not very good, and I'm going to learn from it, and I'll practice more portraits. The other barrier we can feel to crafting is the guilt we feel about giving ourselves the time to set aside for crafting. And that's quite normal. We feel that we should be doing something useful. We need to be feeding the kids, we need to be going to work, we need to be doing some CPD. Why would we set aside time for us? But that's something that really is a false thing. I hope I can show you now that crafting can be that mindfulness that we're perhaps all lacking a little bit. It can also give you self-fulfillment and many other positive things as well. So there should be no guilt in setting aside some time each day or on a regular basis to be doing some crafting. It doesn't even need to be a particularly long period of time. If you have a project you can pick up and set down, it could only be 5-10 minutes a few times a week. Another barrier to crafting can be that we don't actually finish any of our projects. And certainly some of the unfinished projects littered around the house are testament to that. But I don't think that should be a barrier either. To me, sometimes it's more the journey of learning, the process, that is more important than the actual finished outcome. And yes, it's nice to have some finished things and to show people, to give as gifts and things, but actually the mindfulness bit is actually in the process, in the making, rather than the outcome. So maybe concentrate on that as well. So I hope you can see now that you can be creative and not just productive, and that it can be really helpful for mental health. So now it's time for me to introduce what the crafting project is for this year, for WellVet Virtual 2020. And the project is to make a small piece of craft or art that can be used to turn into a card that you can then send to friends or family or even WellVet buddies. I don't want to set any rules. Rules can stifle creativity. So these are just suggestions or a framework. Feel free to do whatever you like. I would like you to consider reusing, recycling or repurposing materials and trying not to buy any more. If you have things that you want to use, then that's fine as well, but maybe try using them in a new way. I would like you to try something new. I've had great fun over the past few days trying all kinds of new, weird and wonderful crafts. So yeah, have fun, experiment. I don't want you to recreate things that you see. It's fine to use things as inspiration, but you don't want to be copying something. You want this to be your own individual work. And lastly, make sure you have fun. I had lots of fun over the past few days experimenting and playing with all the different kind of crafts I could show you guys. Let's get crafting!